everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button for me if you would. There's a PayPal link in the details section for anybody that wants to share some love. And the panel link is down there for anybody that wants to join the panel. We got John with us tonight. How you doing again, John?
Doing good, Keith.
Good, good. Any comments about yesterday's thing on Socratic logic as we went along and ended up with know thyself? Did you learn anything about yourself between yesterday and today?
Yeah, I'm just thinking deeper of how much school I had and how little school Mark Twain had, or Hemingway, or Bernard Shaw, right? They all left school before they were 13, Keith. Look how smart they
Absolutely.
were.
You know, that's an interesting point because I was just doing some research before I come up on the manifest determinations. And surprisingly enough, when we talk about that term manifest, as we think about taking things from our thought and manifesting them, the manifest determination, a term used in the legal system, is made in the public education system in grade school. That's what the grading system is all about. It's about ranking you for your manifest destiny in life. They're using the statistical elements of your thought processes as determined by teachers that are teaching you, but yet at the same time posing some kind of psychological evaluation without being licensed to do so. See, it's the teachers that report all these behavior problems, right? Are they licensed to do that? No. And when we send our kids to these public education systems where we have this plethora of dogmatic views from all different cultures, isn't that a foundational point of the controversy being instilled in a child's mind, whereas distracting him from bringing him up in the ways of the Lord, where he's being subjected to all these different possibilities and nobody pointing him out in a directive on which one to follow, including mom and dad, because they're the ones that sent him off to that dogmatic system? This is where the confusion comes in.
Yep. Well, they only grade animals, as far as I know.
Absolutely. That's what a birth certificate is for. It's for the owner of an animal so he can earmark it or tattoo it or put a logo on it or brand it or something like that. As far as I know, that legal name in that construct has never been branded or earmarked or anything yet. It's just got a collateral record being kept track of, but the true record isn't being balanced. That's all it is. So we're going to get into it again tonight on number 8. Remember, last night we left off on number 7, which was the commonsensical part of applying logic and reason to your life, and that's so you can know thyself. And everybody automatically uses logic and reason inherently as a young child. As a young child, still learning how to make choices from their mom and dad is a discernment of how to make good choices versus bad choices. Yet the child will still make choices by using his own logic and reason. And generally, it's very simple. I want. I want is all it takes. That's the first thing in order. I want. The second thing in order is the emotivation, emotions, what emotes them. Then they start moving. That's when they start learning to pick their head up. They want something. They see dad across the room. They're going to lift their head up. My son did it all the time. It made him healthy and strong, laying him on his belly on the floor, and he would constantly push up to see up at daddy, because daddy was up here not laying on the floor with him. It forced him to exercise and use his logic and reason in a natural way that I didn't even know. Now that I've done my research, that's the same thing I use with my dogs to train them. It's a logic and reason. If the dog wants this and I want him to do this, then all I got to do is hang a carrot out there for him. That's what it is. It's a reward system. Most people go into this world and don't understand this, and they end up with consequences instead because their logic and reason is faulted in their belief. So, this is why I say I think everybody needs to create a foundational philosophy of their own by looking at the philosophy of other people and using them to construct their own little path. And so number eight says it's philosophical, both in its applications and in its foundations. Of all applications of logic, philosophy is the most interesting, subjectively, and the most important, objectively. Philosophy asks the big questions. This is why I love coming up with really good questions that are real short and simple, that are yes or no's, and you either deny them or you don't. It exposes those that are willing to accept the lies. This book exposes students to the ideas of the great philosophers all along the way by frequent quotations to the ideas of the great philosophers, with a series of chapters which uses logic to introduce the fundamental questions of metaphysics, philosophical theology, cosmology, ethics, anthropology, and epistemology. Now, epistemology is one of the first things I started researching when I got into all this about 8 years ago, and that's the root of the knowledge. And then you have etiology, which is the root of the cause, and then etymology, which is the root of the words. And this is talking about the same concept here, going back in time to the roots of philosophy and learning from all those that pose philosophy. It's going back to the roots of the language and all of the adoptions and changes along the way, the adaptations, additions, subtractions, things like that. It prepares students for reading great books, not Dick and Jane. See, that's what the public education system does. It indoctrinates us to remember simplicity like Dick and Jane, whereas it's not even teaching us the correct grammar of concise English. Philosophy is not only an application of logic, but logic also has philosophical foundations. Logic is not always philosophically neutral. In other words, this is why we have this dogmatic system in the public education and commercial diversity platforms. But each one of them, it's like religion. They all have basic constructs that are founded on the same principles, which are objectively true. And that's why they're objectively important. They transport from one place, from one culture to another, and they seem similar, so they're agreed upon as a natural equality. This is what brings together communication of two different cultures, the equalities. Logic is not always philosophically neutral. Different kinds of logic sometimes imply or presuppose importantly different philosophical positions. This book's philosophy is Aristotelian realism. It dares to take a philosophical stand on controversial issues like truth, certainty, and universals. It affirms all three, by the way. This stand is neither ideological nor religious, but commonsensical and traditional. So again, it's based in the cultures. Each culture has the same base principles of a greater power. That's the first thing in order. Every culture realizes that something else greater than itself created it. Even the native people on the American soils talk about their forefathers, the great spirits in the sky, those that had ascended, and they knew they came from the earth and that they would return to the earth. They knew the earth owned us and that we don't own the land. This is all objective truth that most every culture will agree with. That's logic and reason. That's putting things in order from the beginning. Says this stand is neither ideological nor religious, but commonsensical and traditional. But precisely, it is commonsensical and traditional. It is counterculture and controversial in today's philosophical marketplace because so many more people are developing their philosophies. But again, I urge people to get over the indifferences and If you're really using reason and logic, then you go back to the origins, the base principles, and see that they are the ones that are of like kind. That's the foundation of growth, prosperity, abundance, and coming together and connecting as groups and societies of people. 9, it says it's constructive. In other words, you have to build it as we go. This is what I talk about, this organization under the laws of the United States, being incorporated or not. It's about a developmental stage. The enumeration at birth was a developmental stage, creating a legal name for a United States business that never developed beyond that point because nobody knew it. That record has been held against us, and that's what's out of order. Not us, it.
It's unorganized, right, Keith?
Correct. We have never been organized under the laws of the United States, and that's proven because the Federal Reserve will say, no, we have no communication. We don't know who this guy is. Can he show us an ID? I don't have a state ID. The state might have one on file that can show that I did, in fact, enter false data elements as a resident, and the record will show that I was never deemed necessary by the board, that that meeting never happened, and it will reflect that there are no minutes of the meeting before that board where it was concerned about my name in any venue. None. It did not happen. Therefore, it creates an inconsistency where we now need to go back and have that meeting to determine if I am deemed necessary by the board. And if not, it's now known as an impossibility. They have no office for me to fill. They're already full. Don't you get it? It teaches how to make good arguments as well as how to refute bad ones. And such constructive lessons as how to use the Socratic method, how to write a good essay. This is why I say, and I maybe don't say it often enough, along with that concise English handbook, you should get a college composition handbook so you can learn how to write these private notices. How to read a book.
I'm not laughing at you, Keith.
Well, you should, because I was the ignorant one that stood in front of that clown in the black robe, and when he asked me if I understood English, stood there and said, "Yes." I don't understand English, folks. I will never understand English. I comprehend it much better today, and I use it much better today. How to organize and outline, how to debate, how to argue logically with difficult people. For some mysterious reason, these practical arts are usually neglected in logic books. It's part of the English language. Like I said, it's a beautiful language. And along with the logic and reason, you have to be able to use that language. Isaiah 54:17, no tongue shall prosper against you. That's rebutting the commercial system. The criminal side is let no one rise up, or you shall condemn anybody that rises up in judgment against you. Why? Because that's only his discernment. There is no power but that which is ordained of God. Therefore, if they're coming at you and calling you names and accusing you of some statutory code violation, they're placing a false judgment. That's not his law. His law is to owe no man anything but to love one another. So when anybody makes any kind of an attack like that, it is not in love, and therefore you get to condemn that word. You don't condemn the man, you condemn their words. Number 10, it's clearly divided. This book, it says there are 89 sections or mini chapters in the 16 chapters of the book. So there's about 5 chapters, a little bit more, 5, 6 chapters, or 6 breakdowns in each chapter. Each section teaches only one basic point. This enhances clarity for the beginning student. Some logic textbooks try to teach too many things in a single section, and the result is confusion. This book does only one thing at a time. That's relative like to legalese when we went over the definition of legalese. It shows how things are stated in concise English, but then when you get to legalese, instead of that one little sentence, it's now a paragraph long sentence with certain commas or breaks, but no periods or anything. It's just one long paragraph long sentence. And when you look into it, when they use terms like sheriff, like I discussed last night, that's a Babel term. Shire, reeve is what that term comes from. And they both literally mean official, administrator, executor, top authority, whatever. So they're literally saying the same thing twice. Boss, boss, authority, authority. Slave, slave, if you want to look at it that way. Sheriff. It's two terms put into one English word that we say and we don't even understand it.
Plus all the doubles and triples too in legalese, Keith, like the null and void, fit and proper, cease and desist.
Yep. They do it literally over and over, and that's why you should become very apprehensive when you see any document that's using any kind of Latin, any kind of italicization, capitalization, all capitalized sections or anything like that. You should be very wary of them. That's showing you different grammar styles within the same document, showing that it's a Babel document. The sections are determined by content, not by length. Since there is only one basic point per section, and since some points are easier than others, some sections are much shorter than others. Why not? Why should quantity determine quality? Why should the accidental determine the essential? See, that's what we talk about in this system here. Why should the aired record determine the absolute outcome? It can't. If you point out the error in the record, it changes the outcome. Therefore, it tells you the outcome is not absolute. Comprehend that one simple thing, folks. That will help you correct anything through reason and logic. If the outcome is being negative, if the outcome is causing detriment, if the outcome is causing you harm, injury, or damage, there's something wrong with the data elements that got entered. If then go to. Something happened in the initial clarification or the initial belief, wherein the definition did not end up correct. It's flexible. This is where it concurs with equity. When we talk about equity, you have to create your own remedy. And in this system where they pose things as being true and absolute in that electronic record, and then you point out the errors, you have to be able to create a remedy. Because again, like I said many times, these officers don't know what they're doing. You have to teach them. If you have to teach them, then that means you have to be able to show them the path through. You have to be the guide. You have to be the one that steps up. No one else will do it for you. None. This is a path of getting to know thyself most inherently and most comprehensively, the most important aspect before you can even get onto the philosophical or constructive or commonsensical stuff. You have to be able to develop that common sense of knowing yourself first. While you're in this popularity contest, that's the distraction. You're wanting to be somebody else instead of getting to know thyself so you can put yourself out there. You're trying to put somebody else out there. You're trying to dress up like somebody else. That's why all these movie stars, these male movie stars, are dressing up as women in dresses and stuff and taking on those roles. They're making fun of them. They're beta cucks. They're emasculating the feminine the women and effeminizing the men. That's what it's all about. It's a distraction to keep you from presenting yourself in your true being. It's flexible. The division into so many sections gives the teacher an option to select a mix and match of sections in many different ways, depending on the emphasis desired. So this is literally a book that you can use to learn and then turn around and teach according to your style of teaching. by using the different sections and methods in your own pattern. It doesn't have to be a pattern. You can, like, say you want to help your sister out. You know your sister pretty well. It's not that you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but you have an intimate knowledge of your sister, and you can more intimately see her problems, whether they be selfishness or gluttony or whatever, and help her concentrate on that in the commonsensical way to get rid of those bad attributes or to balance them in the rest of her life, to make it so that she knows herself and what she can and can't do that is good for her. There are people that can drink socially, no problem. It's a matter of balancing. It's not a matter of addiction. It's a matter of balancing. I hate the 12-step programs for that. There are 4 kinds of sections: basic logic, advanced logic, practical applications, and philosophical logic. The table of contents marks the basic sections, B, marks the philosophical sections, P, and puts the practical application in sections in chapter 15. This allows the book to be used in at least 10 different ways, ranging from the very short to the very long. The basics only, number 1. The basic sections plus the philosophical sections, number 2. The basic sections plus the more advanced sections in logic, number 3. The basic sections plus the practical application sections, number 4. The basic sections plus any 2 of these 3 additions, number 5. All of the book as number 6. All or some of it as supplemented by a text in symbolic logic. All or some of it supplemented by a text in inductive logic. All or some of it supplemented by a text in rhetoric or informal logic. Number 10, all or some of it supplemented by readings in and applications to the great philosophers. So it's giving you a pathway of teaching. Again, very relative and important to the aspect that I push all the time, that to feed a man a fish, you feed him for a day. To teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But the bare basic foundational principle is the teaching aspect, that continue on as the foundation of prosperity and abundance in the next generation, and not just in one man. It's inherent for the freedom of expression has greater power of one person if everyone is allowed to assert their right to know. That's what empowers your freedom of expression. It's not your name. It's more inherently the message and other people's right to know. Pure and simple. What do you think about that, John? I think that's the basic crux to that public education system, before you get into it, that is inherently distracting us from our true abilities and our true talents of being those teachers, which is the example Jesus was speaking about in his parables. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a famous quote. The message is the media. I'm not sure I understand that totally, but it does tie into this indoctrination and how they're using the schools against us. We really, I think the less school, the better off we'll be.
Well, it comes down mathematically when we think about that term media. Now, I can go down to the local cigar store and I can pick up, say, 10 articles, 10 different newspapers, Chicago Tribune, New York Times, various different ones from around the nation, top newspaper journalists. And I can get today's report on current events. And I can read through those. From those, I can make a discernment of my own of what is happening. Today, instead of having that as a media, which was what we had as a media in 1970s, along with the television, we now have this internet where we have private journalists coming out and exposing various different elements. So in today's modern time, logic and reason now functions in this metaverse, and it would be wise for us to use that logic and reason to supersede the media that was what we were comfortable and convenient in, to expand it. It's a necessity to learn the technology so we can incorporate those into our logic and reason of our own experiences. So this metaverse, the internet, the greatest library of all, has a plethora of journal aspects that we can look at beyond the quote media as we've known it before. Because now the media includes even me. It includes John sitting right next to me as he speaks and provides his commentary as we go over other media in real definitive terms that are also located. And I dropped that link in the details section for this this book here, PDF form, so you can go look at that. And it's the same thing. It's got all the 16 chapters and the 89 sections, and it says the same thing here that I'm reading. So, like I said, this digital library is the greatest thing, and we need to use its reason and its logic method of being able, or its logic paths to be able to access more media to better help our own logic paths in our own experiences. Go ahead, John.
All right, so like in the 1850s, we had the New York Times. Then we had radio, okay, and then TV. So now we're kind of like going back to like a digital New York Times in a sense, but it's a lot more open. So the media like oscillates. That's what you're saying, right?
Right. And what we have today, like I said, is we have now a forum for media where one article can reach out to every man, woman, and child in the world. Whereas before, that New York Times could only reach so many people according to the expense of shipping. Now we have an electronic digital form, happens like this, and at zero expense. Remember, this is electronic, folks. Go read the meter on your house before that electrical charge goes in, and it's going to say, oh, around 110 volts, so many amps. Now read it on the outside of it after you got all of your lights and every appliance on in the house. Read it as it comes out. It's still going to come out 110 or so volts, so many amps. Where's the use? Where's the loss? Where's the waste? There is none. So we have to realize that there's something wrong inherently in that reason and logic path of being billed for that certain electric utility. Water and gas and other things are slightly different, but still the electrical things here is what we're talking about. The greatest energy source, wireless. How did they figure that out? That sounds like Tesla, doesn't it? Do you think they've already figured out the wireless thing?
Oh yeah, a long time ago.
And they're just not telling you?
Yep. Well, so this is the new platform is like a two-way, but also it's instant and it's also searchable and it's also thinkable. We also have an internet that can think maybe for itself, but it all depends on the users.
Right. And that's it, the users. The users have to understand your right to know, and they have to be willing to accept what you're putting out. Therefore, they have to be looking for what you're putting out. And therefore, they already have to be wanting to accept what you're putting out. If they come in and they're not wanting to accept what you're putting out because it's not what they're looking for, it's a click-through mostly. This is why I have a little giggle when people want to talk about their numbers and stuff. And I've only got 3.2 thousand viewers or subs at this time, 3.18. And I've been doing this on YouTube for a little over 5 years now. Facebook for about 8 years. And Facebook, I've gone up to 5,000 subs, deleted 3,000, gone up to 5,000 subs, deleted 3,000, and now I'm on my way back up to 5,000 subs again. Here on YouTube, I haven't done any deleting. That seems to happen through YouTube by itself, but at the same time, my numbers have steadily increased all the way. There have been no spikes, there have been no drops. It's a steady increase, and that tells me all I need to know. It's getting out there at the rate it needs to get out. I have patience, and that's what patience is all about. More and more will come. And like I said, when I get done with my paperwork, that's when it's going to spike. That's when people are going to start reaching out and wanting to help me out, pay me a little bit, send me something through PayPal, and then I won't need it. See, once I get this figured out and I try to impress upon you guys that what I'm talking is completely true and factual, nobody's ever been able to rebut it in any of my private notices yet, and yet nobody's taken me into these courts over it. You know, I'm talking about clerk down here going to do a forensic audit here pretty soon. And they're running around like the chickens with their heads cut off trying to find these cases that they told us many times they didn't have. And these are clerks that are supposed to have an oath of office. They seem to look pretty young. So I imagine they're going to retire from that position pretty young if I have to go in there and do that. They're either going to start acting through reason and logic, or they're going to deny that reason and logic, and that will prove their incompetency. That will prove that they're the ones that are insane. That will prove that they're the ones that don't understand English. It's in plain writing. So the next one, or it continues on, it says, the first option should take about half a semester. So we're talking about maybe 8 to 10 weeks or so. 2 through 6, a whole semester, and 7 through 10, up to 2 semesters. In a one semester, 14 weeks. So half a semester is about 7 weeks, I guess. One class a week course. You can combine any or all of the following chapters into single class lessons. The introduction and chapter. 2, chapters 6 and 7. 3, chapters 8 and 9. 4, chapters 10 and 11. And 5, chapters 15 and 16. So basically what I'm doing here is like a 1 week course on the, let's see, we're on part 4, probably end up with about 8, 9 parts. So it'll be about a half a semester on just the introduction as I'm doing this. This is literally what this book was intended for. So I hope everybody understands that and takes this as an educational lesson. I'm not trying to teach. I'm actually learning at the same time I'm reading. That's all I'm doing. And I hope you guys are picking up on it as well as my freedom of expression to read the book and give my commentary on it as your right to know. That's why I hope you make these comments and come up on panel. 12. It's short. The first few sections or options above give you a short, basic, no frills, no fat logic text. So this section is literally telling you how you can teach this yourself. That's all it's doing. You don't have to have a degree to do this. Nowhere in history has it ever been that you have to have a degree to teach, except in commercial venues. And if that's the kind of degree you've got, you've been indoctrinated to the commercial venue and you really don't know the truth. In my opinion, of course. 13, it's selective. So you have a selective service and you have a selective logic and reason to defeat that selective service. It emphasizes a relatively small number of big ideas that the student will always need and use and remember, rather than the usual logic text, many bells and whistles that students will rarely use. 14, it's innovative where it needs to be. This is the part about novation, being a creator, creating that remedy. Like I said, if you have a personal experience, an intimate experience with a close relative or something, you can use this to teach and use it in an innovative way with them. They're going to be more associative to it and more willing and accepting of it. Therefore, it's not like you're trying to push it on somebody that doesn't even fucking know you and might have some kind of hesitation. It includes some specific things most other logic texts do not use. A clear distinction between 6 quite different kinds of induction. A unique explanation of the square of opposition that is much cleaner and simpler than any other. This is what I use for the inconsistencies. If it's supposed to be written in plain writing, and it clearly says in the title, such, and such, then why isn't the plain writing in the title being followed? Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 17, plaintiff and defendant, semicolon, capacity, semicolon, public officer. That's telling you in plain English that the public officer has a capacity of a plaintiff or defendant. It doesn't say civilian. It doesn't say resident. It doesn't say United States citizen, but yet that's what it implies, because all of those people are such public officers by claiming resident, federal, state, or municipal officer or agent. Oops. Got to quit it. Go ahead, John.
It's a zone resident. See, they always cover up a word.
Yep, residents of the zone. Yeah, that's a noun phrase. Residents of the zone. It's a noun phrase if you recognize the plain English. 4 words. Residents of the zone. That's a noun phrase telling us there's an activity going on, and it's conducted by these nouns. An overview of the difference between the two logics and its philosophical significance. Practical advice on Socratic method, Socratic debates, and writing Socratic dialogues. If then, go to. That's what Socratic dialogue is. That's what I learned as a basic language in computer programming. It's no wonder I've been able to tear this down and read it for what it is.
Keith, do you think your background in programming or your early education in it helps you think better than most people, or maybe not?
Absolutely. Most people refuse to think backwards. One of the checks in an if-then-go-to programming is to, once you find a path from point A to point B, you go from point B to point A again and make sure it's correct. Same thing we do with the English language. To make sure it's concise, read it backwards. If it says and means the same thing backwards as you read forwards, it's a good sentence.
Right.
There's many interfacings with philosophy. And again, this is that point where I urge everybody to start learning about philosophy so you can develop your own philosophical theories and actions in life. It's Diogenes, the guy that masturbated in the public square. And then when some guy called him a dog, he walked over to him, pissed on his leg, and said, "What else did you expect? You called me a dog, so I'll act like a dog." I think this is the problem with society today. Some of them don't use that logical reasoning to equate what's actually going on, to prove that you're nothing but a bitch-ass slave. If you would realize that you're a bitch-ass slave, you might comprehend a little bit better what your actions are doing and that you're the one doing it yourself. If you want people to quit treating you like a dog, quit pissing on their leg. Simple. Not that you're actually pissing on their leg, but it equates to the same concept. So practical applications of logic to writing and debating. This is why I say truth needs no defense. You really don't need to debate it if you apply the reasons of logic. This is the most complete list of material fallacies I know of, except for 2 books entirely devoted to fallacies. Fallacy, The Counterfeit of Argument by Fernside and Holther, and Historians, Fallacies by David H. Fisher. Interesting, I might have to read those. I'm sure I thought that the first time I read this, but never thought back on it. Matter of fact, take out my highlighter. And highlight them. A good practice I urge everybody to get into is getting your own books or printing off your own PDFs and getting your own highlighters so you can read them and make specified notes so you can expand your research, because you got to remember, you're not going to research it just once and get it down. Through my 8 years, I've researched many topics many times over and over and over again on many different things, as well as the same thing over and over again to make sure I got it down. And in that research have caught changes, which helps and forces me to keep doing the research to catch future and further changes. Otherwise, how will I be able to adopt and adapt to those changes if I don't know them? The importance of research. So it continues on. It says it's interactive. It includes many exercises. It's actually like a workbook. It's got things in here where it's going to start asking questions, and then it's got a answer section in the back, just like math books did in high school and stuff, where they had the odd questions, the answers to the odd questions in the back. Because this is how Logic Course takes in students' minds and lives. Now, the lives are the physical bodies and the interactions in life, and the minds, those are the intellectual thoughts. Understand, mind is not your brain. Mind is the intellectual thoughts that you have. Greetings, brother. How you doing tonight?
Well, not too bad. How you doing?
Good, good. Just got about 15 more minutes going over this Socratic logic book. I'm just going over the introduction, and we're talking about how it's commonsensical is what we started on tonight as it relates to knowing yourself, which is where we ended up last night. And then it went into philosophical uses. And currently we're talking about the innovation and its interactiveness with our life so that we can get to know ourselves, so we can put forth our logic and reason and why we do things based on our beliefs, our ability to clarify that belief to a point of definition so that whoever we're speaking with comprehends what we're saying. Our freedom of expression, their right to know. It's the circulation of communication through logic.
That's a very deep philosophical way to look at it.
Well, yeah, it's nobody can interact with another man except through their person. It's the only way it happens. You have to be able to give some kind of defined intent that has to be contemplated or observed, contemplated, and acted upon in reaction or response by another party. It's the only way we communicate. In every kind of communication, it's got to be done through person. We have to understand how our belief is being defined on the other side.
Because it's all subject to interpretation of each person's coming from their own experience on how they transmogrify what you've given them and the message, energy, and thought that you're sharing.
Correct.
Okay. I got you. So,
and it goes on to say, because this is how a logic course takes in students' minds and lives, it includes many exercises. That's why it says it broke down into 16 chapters with 89 sections, just small sections, so you can take a quick break and contemplate it, and then go on to the next one. It is more effective to master a few important principles by much practice than to be exposed to so many principles and so little practice that you cannot remember and apply the principles after the course is over. This is why I say it's important to realize in my research here, you may not have seen me do a whole lot of things, but my practice has always been to start writing private communications. Through that process, under that principle alone, I've come upon various different remedies and communications that are opening doors up to future remedies in the further expansion of showing all these errors, because that's all it really is. And it's just going to take patience. Working together with these people, like I said, educating them, because they know not what they do. So I can't hold it against them. I've got to do my best to be that teacher so they can learn how to eat for a lifetime and pass it on to their generations. Go ahead.
I think the main thing for everyone is to figure out their path and how their journey is going to become. Because much like you just floor me sometimes with some of the things you know, it's beyond comprehension from just conventional knowledge and wisdom. So, but each person, you're at a depth that hell, very few people can get to. It's an amazing gift, and it's phenomenal. And like I say, with all the gifts I've had, it's a gift and a curse. You're gifted,
absolutely,
and it does so many wonderful things. But man, it's a burden to carry this stuff. Because again, most people don't get it. So that's the challenge: is how do you communicate such vast wisdom, such vast knowledge to a general populace who struggles with just basic information?
and
not
that's
for everybody.
Yeah, and that's what I said the other night, and it kind of correlates with catching pearls before swine. The plethora of knowledge that I've come across, I can put it out all I want. I can explain it to you, but it's up to you to comprehend it. So in that, I have a higher obligation to do my best, and I hope I'm doing. I still hear people say that what I put out is confusing, but I don't think by limiting things to a 1 hour session where I think I'm being concise, that I'm actually being confusing. I think it's the people that don't comprehend are taking it as confusing because they don't want to slow down, do your research.
Well, most of the problem, I think, with most people is that you've got confusing backgrounds of information, and how you process that information is always something that's confusing. And if you've been misinformed on how to process certain new information, it's going to be over their head. So you're right to slow down. But I think the biggest thing is understand how you learn. And most folks don't. They don't know how they learn. They just take what they get and they move on. But you have to go and know self. And once you know self, then you can start the process of digesting exactly how you learn.
Yeah, and that's what a large portion of what we've read so far is pointing out, is that this logic and reason education is going to help you learn thyself. In that, it's going to everything in your life. Knowing thyself is about everything that happens in your life. And that goes back to that definition of plenary powers, having the full powers to govern yourself in everything you do. And the only way you can do that is through logic and reason. You've got to come out of those emotions.
Yeah, that's easier said than done, especially when
you
have so many people that are emotionally bound in how they're taught, and their way of problem solving is emotionally based. So when you start dealing with people who have mostly emotional, spontaneous reactions, especially to certain stimuli, you're going to struggle with logical, reasonable reactions when you've already been mostly. That's what I noticed kind of what the system does, is it really focuses on trying to get the emotional, visceral response. And once it gets it, then it stays there. Oh, you're emotional. So clearly logic and reason's beyond you. So we're going to let you be. They basically consider you belligerent. And once you're belligerent, it's like, okay, I got to talk to you no more, because you don't know how to process anything. You don't know how to logically sit down and think things through. And that's where I think I've kind of mastered the art of, you can do whatever you want to do to make me viscerally react, but you're not going to get it.
Exactly.
So now that I don't give you that reaction, now what are you going to do?
Exactly. And that's the thing about the malfeasance and misfeasance using reason and logic on those errors in the record. If you point out those errors in the record and they're a public servant, they're going to sit there and say, I'm just doing my job. That is evidence they are willing to accept lies so they can get a paycheck. That means they're willing to alter those records or let somebody else alter them and still sign on as if though they're just doing their job and somebody else has to take liability. No, you're acting as agent, acting as principal. Sorry,
but again,
I told you about an error and you refuse to do anything to fix that error, despite the fact that you know one of your job duties is the integrity of the record.
That's the thing, is they're able to cheat because the people that hire them, they willfully only teach them what they need them to know.
Yep.
And Long as somebody tacitly accepts, okay, I'm just going to rubber stamp this because you told me to. But when they actually learn their job and they actually learn what their responsibilities are, they're like, oh my goodness, I can't do this anymore. If I keep doing this, I'm making myself liable for all of these actions. And
yeah, every time you do, it's a 20-year sentence. Oh my God.
yeah. But they don't know. And they willfully, in my opinion, keep the pay down because it's a living wage, but it's not a comfortable living wage. So
yeah, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a
yeah.
year. It's not too bad, but
yeah, it's a living wage if you have a dual income. But if you don't have a dual income, well, this is all you got. So every dollar counts, and when every dollar counts, I can't lose my job, and they know that, and they want to know your whole history. Oh, you were divorced, and you have 2 kids, and you're paying alimony or support, and so they know that. Okay, you're making 75. All right, well, here, go ahead and stamp this for me real quick. Well, in the rules, it says I'm not supposed to do that. Well, I know what the rules say, but you want to keep this job, and they're stuck. How do you get out of it?
Your policy versus law that says you have a fiduciary duty or obligation versus that contractual responsibility is quite different, ma'am.
Yeah, it's so diabolically evil the way they do this, and people. It's literally like I told one of the sheriffs, one of the deputies. I said, I understand you're doing your job, but you got to know you're violating my rights. You got to know you're violating your oath. You got to know you're doing that. And he kind of nodded his head. He didn't say yes or no. He just nodded his head like, yeah. And I said, I understand, because the reality is, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job.
Yep.
And if you lose your job, then that means you got to relocate, and you already moved to this county, and you already got, all these expenses all these debts that you incurred just trying to pay things off, and you're screwed. You're so screwed. And it's like, they put everybody in society in a compromising situation. 5 people actually know what really goes on. Everybody else is completely professionally deceived. Yep. And then we, the people, when we try to stand up and say, hey, I want my rights, they're like, you can get them, but you're not going to get them from me.
Yeah, and that's why I say, again, we've got to learn how to teach these people. I've got the opportunity coming up on the 1st to join an audit going on here at the local Waterloo Police Department parking lot in reference to a friend of ours that got sentenced to 10 days in jail, a veteran. And again, I'm the one that's got that documentation, Steve. So we're going to go down there. We're going to ask him for a financial index after he's released and do a investigation on the index, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tell you what, I'm cautiously optimistic because I just don't want to get too excited yet. But
me either. I've been holding on to this information for over 7 years now, Steve. When I got that financial index and saw that, I'm anxious too, brother.
Yeah. I don't want to get too presumptuous because things don't always go like you anticipate. But to feel like you finally got the weaponry that you need to truly go into what I consider peaceful combat, and that literally all we're trying to do is get the truth to the table.
Yeah, reconciliation as an armistice agreement for full acquittance and discharge. Listen, I understand there was harm, detriment, and injury, and people got their feelers hurt and all this, but it's time that we're full-grown boys and girls. Like I always like to say, it's time to put things down on the table, sort them out. Is that a spoon or a fork? Well, that's a fork. Okay, that goes over here. Let's get real simple about this.
Keep it simple, stupid. And that's the thing, is that when you actually flip the switch, I really feel like once you get these audits going, there's going to be some people running scared for the hills. Scared.
Yep. Absolutely, because when you look at, like I said, if you get those audits and you find anywhere in the record, and I'm going to pull something down for you real quick, everybody. Okay, when it comes to these agreements, This is the medical society first and foremost. And I have here an agreement. Let me turn my background off. I'm going to pull me up full screen. Now, this is from the local emergency room. And it says, see, it says Allen ER. And it says it's a sales agreement, folks. So it's a contract. Okay? On the back, under sales agreement, it says the customer agrees to pay the stated price. That's a customer. This is not consumer credit at this point. It says customer.
Which means you're buying a product.
Right. The customer agrees to pay the stated price for the equipment, it being understood that credit will be given to the customer's account for payments received from any medical insurance program or from any third party. Guess who the third party is? The customer. The customer has a consumer. The consumer is the patient. The consumer is LITT. Oops.
So that's fraudulent agreements.
That's conversion.
Oh.
That's conversion.
Okay.
That's an unknown conversion until I found out. See, I found out on the court document first. Then I saw it on a prescription. I thought, wait a minute. That's the same conversion they use down at the courthouse. That is a firm name. Why is the pharmacy using a firm name when I've never communicated with them or gave them consent to use such a firm name, because I was never educated myself to use such a firm name in the usufruct that we live in. Unknown conversions are reconcilable. That's all we're doing.
So if we audit and flip the conversions, and that's in everything.
The reversion.
There's no case
Absolutely
that exists where there's no.
How can a debtor put a claim against the creditor? That's what it'll do. It'll show a net daily money log report 1021. And on that, it will show that you are the principal and they've been making false claims under Rule 12B. They've been asking to be compensated when they didn't lose anything, and they've been making that claim for compensation against the actual original issue creditor. And the birth certificate shows you are the holder in due course of the original issue, and therefore have the right to enforce it.
Man, I was excited earlier, dude.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got 3 of the birth certificates right here with me. Plus, I've got one for my companion. We might have to order a couple more. But like I said, I think it's in a matter of handing one to the bank, sending one to the Treasury, and one back to the Social Security office with a directive for expenses incidental to transfer of title to the United States and the Postal Service for clearance and settlement, and then reversion back to a true estate, and that would be the private estate named Keith Orland Little FBU to be merged with that. It's a bankruptcy. Repaying all creditors first.
Good God. This is the big transfer of wealth they're talking about.
Absolutely. Why would you worry about a transfer of wealth around the world if you knew the truth and were able to protect your own funds, knowing that's where they get their wealth, is your funds, which is a collateralization of your assets.
Which is the named estate in all bonds and documents created.
The collateral asset is the intangible property that starts it all, and that is the given name.
Well, I got an investigator I'm hopefully working with, and I think I got a way to walk him to this. I hope
Yeah, if you need any help, like I said, I've got that plethora of memory here for some reason. I've been gifted, and it's a curse.
Well,
That
you
I can
spit
sit
it
down
just
and any point you want, I will pull up the code.
you spit it right on time every time. Like I said, I feel like I'm just a gladiator with the hammer and the sword, and I go in the fight, and then I just get tired because there's only so many walls I can beat down, and I need to
rest
spell.
them legs then, because I'll be the chariot.
Well, I'm telling you, I feel like you're straight up artillery right now. I need you to take down a couple walls for me, and then once I'm in, boy, it's over. I'm going
full
in.
armor, baby, full armor. All glory
I'm going
goes to
in.
God.
Oh, this is some crazy stuff. Because I really feel like the situation I got with my boy Danny's case is it's so superficial that there's no way he can miss it.
Would you mind if I put you full screen and you explain that about Danny real quick?
Oh, sure.
Would you mind that?
No, not a problem.
Awesome. Guys, welcome Steve Martin, a friend of mine I met through another panel, Paul Enslaved, of course. And he's got an interesting story about a brother of ours that was put in jail. I believe it was over a travel incident in Missouri or something.
Texas.
Texas. And he finally got him to admit that he was the administrator over his brother Danny's estate, and he has now been released from jail, and we're working on that to come to terms with a settlement of some sort, I imagine.
Well, the sad part is that Danny's case, he was trying to get his mother's home, and his mother's home, she had passed away in 2020. And he didn't know what to do. He was 22 at the time, so he didn't know what to do, and he had no clue. He became girlfriends with my sister-in-law, or former. That's another complicated story of itself. But when he got intimate with her and told her about his situation, that he's going to lose his mom's house, she brought him to me, and then we started talking. And I had been doing much of this stuff already. And I was already in probate, doing different things in probate. And we went and filed in probate, and I became his administrator. He assigned me his administrator. We filed a probate case. And by the way, you can get in probate for free. You just got to know how to do it. But I took it to him, we went into probate, filed all the documents, trying to make the claim. We found that there was no deed of trust for the home.
Right, that's the underlying document that needs to be brought forth, is a deed of trust, proving that there's a trust being operated. Like I said, all these contracts operate under a trust, so they must bring the underlying documentary evidence of the obligation, and that's a deed of trust. If there is no deed of trust, sorry.
So the issue is that because there was no deed of trust, we were basically saying, hey, the beneficiaries are the claimants. There's no loan or lien to settle. But the law firm didn't agree. So the law firm files a civil case. They allegedly sold the property on courthouse steps. They didn't sell it at the courthouse. They sold it at the law firm. And a company we never heard of allegedly bought the property and was claiming that they had a clear chain of custody and deed and rights to the deed. But there was no deed. So we were filing in probate like, yo, there's no deed, so what are you doing? So they filed the civil case claiming that they had jurisdiction and that they could attain the property through civil. And we're like, no, you can't. That's why we got the probate case. But because I was the administrator, they didn't want to do it. So consequently, they go through the civil case, railroaded the process to claim custody of the case, and stole the home.
Yeah, see, that's what I was talking about, Steve, with the cases in these courts. Everything they do is an adoption. So you adopt it, and then you do your line item veto and overriding, and that's an adaptation. It's all about the language, and it's specific. It tells you what to do.
Well, the burden is that they stole the home fully in civil. And the only way you're supposed to transfer title is through probate. They didn't do that. Not even close.
Right. And that transfer can only happen by a clerk. not the judge.
So they transfer. I don't know what they've done all the title work. I haven't looked into all the title work because I really didn't care. Because basically, I said we got a RICO case right here.
If there's no deed of trust, then there's no title.
Yes, they have no chain of custody whatsoever on how it went from the deed of trust to the law firm, and then from the law firm to the salespeople. They don't have any transaction history of that whatsoever. And we had already made the claim in 2022. She passed away in 2020. They have 12 months after her passing, as any debtor, any creditor with any valid claim must post that valid claim in the state of Missouri within 12 months. They didn't report nothing.
And see, folks, the deed of trust is the thing that titles the trust itself. It's what names the trust and then puts forth its actions as being a in good faith intent. If there is no deed of trust, there is no title, there is no documentary evidence of an obligation anywhere.
So you can have, if you actually loaned money, you could have that loan on the record, but you have to file the loan or the debt on the record in the county for which the property would be adjudicated, because it's territorial jurisdiction. They didn't do any of this. None of this was done. And so when they seized the property with the city police. They didn't use the sheriff's office. And we were trying to get in the sheriff's office and they wouldn't let us in. During the business.
See, that's the wrong jurisdiction. See, police are civil and the land is common law.
Sheriff.
That's the sheriff.
If you transfer property of any kind, be it people, land, asset, cars, doesn't matter. The sheriff is supposed to do it, not the city police. But nothing but city police showed up. We tried to get in the sheriff's office to get the sheriff's office to show up. The sheriff's office wouldn't even open the door. And then it was during business hours. They had no legitimate thing. So I say all that just to say they did that, and then they held Danny for a case in Texas for possession of uncontrolled substance. That possession case was like 2018, and they canceled the case by 2022. It was canceled, but when they pulled him over,
they tried bringing it back up.
In 23, they reopened the case in Texas.
Yeah, that's double jeopardy, because that's a contract unit. That's 1 year. That's all they have, 1 year.
Yeah, so that's why they had closed the case. But when they arrested him here in Missouri, they reopened. They convinced Texas to reopen the case. Texas reopens the case. They held him in Missouri for 90 days. At the end of 90 days, they said, "Hey, Danny, you realize that if we pull you over again for this instance, that you could be detained again." And the worst thing he ever said was yes, because he basically just conceded to a contract for them to go ahead. And what they did is they went ahead and issued a governor's warrant, which then had him extradited to Texas. So when he gets extradited to Texas, they don't just take him to Texas on a bus or a plane or a train. Right. They sent a plane to come and get him, as if he was John Gotti or wanted
under the military jurisdiction. That's under the military jurisdiction. Yeah. We're talking about the governor. He's the commander in chief of the state, and that's what the license is all about. Every state, the driver's license is to drive at the pleasure of the governor.
So his whole case is beyond reproach. So he stayed 90 days in jail here in Missouri. Then he went, in the last 30 days he stayed, it was 30 days on behalf of the governor's warrant after his 90 days. So he spent that time and then another 60 days in Como, Texas. And when I tell you they made up every excuse in the book to keep him, and what I discovered was provost jurisdiction. In that when they do provost jurisdiction, they can keep you 90 days regardless. And that's just the military.
That's that military jurisdiction. Yeah, they always fall back on that. And that's that 32 CFR 156.1 area office. The selective service is responsible for the operations and administrations of the board or local boards within its jurisdiction. So the courts are actually operating in the military jurisdiction, and that is an admiralty flag in that courtroom, and that is significant to the grammar that they use.
Have you shown the diagram of how they do the jurisdiction and why things twist so badly?
No, if you want to pull that link up, we can.
I'm gonna have to find it here for a sec. Well, let me just finish the Danny story real quick. So he goes to Como, Texas, and they fiddle faddle around. They ignore everything we're writing on the record. They're ignoring everything he says. They're just going to keep him for this 60 days. They could keep him there. They kept him there for 60 days. And on the last day, they offered him a deal. And it's like the last day, you literally got the max out, but they've had him terrorized for 180 days. They've ruined his life with everything they could by taking him out. They cut him. They say, okay, you're going to get time served, but you're still going to have the felony on your record. So he gets out. He's able to get back here. And now the law firm that took the house, magically what happened is on the record, all of a sudden, there's a deed of trust, there's transfer titles, there's all these things that they didn't have. Now all of a sudden they got it. And it's all on the record. But I said, they did us a solid. We don't even have to work for this one. This is a RICO case flat out, because when we originally filed for the probate case, we filed stating that there was no deed of trust. There was no instrument that existed for them to hold him from the property. None. And even with that, they took it a step further by when they evoked this bank as being the deed of trust holder. There's no chain of custody coming from the bank to the law firm, let alone chain of custody going from the bank to the person they sold it to. There's nothing recorded. And everything they put on the record since then is like, we already got all the files from a probate case. I got hard copies that I printed, not to mention they hacked my computer and erased most of them. But I got the hard copies that we printed, and he's got the originals. So we know we're going RICO. We know it. And the forensic audit is going to blow the hat off of all of it. And that's why with what you're saying, I already know where this is going to go. And that's why I'm trying not to get too excited. But I'm proceeding with caution because they're going to try to come up with something. But literally, show me the chain of custody. And if you can't do that, you're already guilty.
Yeah, and let me point something out to you guys too as well. Even with a chain of custody that's supposedly clean in their legal system, the inherent legacy heir has a superior right to make a superior claim, so long as he can prove that superior claim in good faith above and beyond the commercial use that they use to condemn the land first. See, their title is always going to show a condemnation of land for public use. That's their eminent domain. That's why the address is attached. That's why it's important that we remember when we do these titles and stuff, we detach that address. That's what the mortgages are actually on. When they do a mortgage, when they foreclose on a mortgage, they're foreclosing on the address, the postal address. They're foreclosing on the business side, not the private side. They can't foreclose on the private side, period. And that's what these forensic audits are all about. Go ahead, John.
It's abandonment first, then they condemn it, right, Keith?
Correct. And that's what they're saying is that in this probate court, that there's an abandonment of a will. That's what probate means. It means to prove a will. And what's happening is they're not accepting not only the living will of Danny in making his superior claim to his rightful property as it belonged to his mother, but the error in the record that the deed of trust didn't exist, and now all of a sudden it magically does, where inherently the intent of a testator's will is to pass on all of his real and personal effects, known as property, tangible and intangible, to his legacy heirs before anybody else. The only distinction is that if that testator owes any creditors, then those must be paid off first. This is the point of coming forth as a beneficiary, being the true creditor of the estate as a legacy heir. Pure and simple. So anyway, you guys got anything else to say before we close out? I want to thank you for coming up and talking about Danny's story there, Steve. Appreciate it.
I got the military thing, if you want.
Oh, okay, yeah. Drop that in the back chat for me, and let's look at that real quick.
I could just show it. Already show it.
Okay. All right.
Here we go. Okay, can we see this?
Yep.
Okay, I'll zoom in on it. Okay, forget what you know about your government, because this is the real government that runs us all. This is the military government. You can find this as military ADA 606156. Please look it up. But this is what our government really is. So the thing is notice that the theater commander runs the whole thing, which I believe is the president. The theater commander also, which is the military governor. So I believe that's your governor of your state, the yellow tasseled governor that we're speaking of. So the important thing to look at when you're looking at this is everybody's trying to find reparations and restitution. But look at where reparations and restitution lies inside of the military government. It is down here at the bottom under this line of jurisdictions next to these lines of jurisdictions. And you got your government, finance, supply, education, culture, displaced persons and refugees, transportation, legal, public health, welfare, public safety, civil censorship, I emphasize that, property control, reparations, restitution, statistics, reports, port control, food industries, commerce and trade, industry, manufacturing, labor, public utilities, civil communications, control of commodities, prices, and rationing.
All fiat currency. It's a military currency system, and it tells you right there, they control the commodity prices.
They control everything. And so it's under the governor. There's a deputy military governor, political and economic advisors, and we'll get over here in a second. General.
I dropped the link to this graph. You'll see it down there on like page 7 or excuse me, page 11 or 12 there in that link that I dropped in the chat, guys.
So the thing I'm pointing out is in reparations and restitution, when you're going to them, you're going to one of these jurisdictions. And so that's why when you learn what you learn, that's fantastic. But the reality is they set up a whole litany of hoops, ladders, obstacle course for you to get through. And if you can't figure out how to get through it, you're stuck in that jurisdiction. If you're smart enough to figure out how to get out of that jurisdiction, guess what they do? They pull you out of there. You fall back to the deputy military governor, and he'll throw you into another one. This is why you go and you'll find solutions, and one person will win. The next person that goes in right behind them will lose, because when they pull you out, they change the rules. Because this is all under military occupation. They do what they have to do to maintain the military occupation. So that's why they can change the rules at any time. And this is where a lot of people who are looking for relief get frustrated, because, man, I found this one solution. I did it, but my friend did it. It didn't work. Or you tried in another state and it won't work. So the route I've chose to go is right over here under indigenous government. Look at where you come from. You come directly from the military governor to the government. You bypass all 20 of these and just deal with an indigenous advisory group. So when you look at this chart, you're like, God dang, we're literally spinning our wheels trying to get through reparations and restitution. We're spinning our wheels because there's no other relief.
Yeah, and that's that American Citizen Services organization that I told you about here last week or so, folks. American Citizen Services Organization. They're the ones that are going to work with Health and Human Services to help correct the records as an estate recovery program, because we are truly the creditors, and the record reflects a decedent, meaning that a testator passed away without proving a will. We are here, we are proving our will now, and that record needs to be reconciled.
So here's the full solution to me, because for the most part, if you're 2 generations in this country, you're indigenous. So all of us can get indigenous relief.
Yep.
You get over here to the indigenous government, and then you bypass all this stuff, and then you come down to an indigenous area administrative authorities. So here's the reality. They don't want you going and building weapons, bombs, or anything against them. So that's
right. All of their crimes are commercials, are basically regulated pursuant to like the ATF, and it's about beer or alcohol, liquor, drugs, firearms, crimes of violence and degradation against the people. That's all it is. As long as you conduct your affairs reasonably, you're going to be fine.
You're gonna go to the indigenous advisory groups. They set you up there, and then once you're set up there, you can start. And this is where I'm at literally right now, trying to work my way through this process of getting the advisory group set up so that I can start putting resources into the government so we can start administering the estate. When I get through that, I'm going to have supervision, i.e. now you got resources. Now you have to, we're not going to just let you, run out there with hundreds of millions of dollars and tip the economy.
Right. It's not so much supervision as it is cooperation.
Correct.
It's a matter of agreement with the government that, there are people that do need governance. And if you ever come to need somebody that's going to stand up in arms, I'm there with you against some combatant belligerent that's just totally fucking insane Karen talking about they can't deal with their neighbor because he refuses to use pronouns. Come on, people. It's time to get over the insanity, put the guns down, learn how to speak first. If you can't learn how to speak first, that's when we're going to find out that these protesters are the belligerents and stuff. And those are the people that need governance.
So let's make the quick point. A typical theater, Army, military, government organization for the occupation phase. We have been under occupation for 2 or 3 centuries now, since the Civil War.
Right. It's an occupation phase, folks. It's a development. And what they're trying to do, or what it's meant to do, is allow the people to establish their republic form of government again, but the people aren't stepping up to do so.
Correct.
In order to do so, we have to be able to fill these public offices with people that are intelligent enough to use the credit system the way it's meant and not put an obligation or a debt upon the United States, but to relieve that by doing that job freely, just like the forefathers did. There was no office. They performed their governmental duties without an office. They went down to the local bar, for crying out loud. That's where the first postal unit was established, at the local bar.
Because that's where everybody's going to go. So
where everybody knows your name.
Yep.
Don't you get it? They're telling you in all of these things. So anyway.
Well, that's the main thing I want to say, and I want everybody to just, do your best. And whatever you do, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Give it all you got.
Yeah, that's all we're doing is correcting the mistakes. We're not incompetent, but at the same time, we're not perfect. So the competence part comes in knowing that we make mistakes and are willing, with an intent, to fulfill an obligation to correct them. That's it.
Yeah.
You got anything on the way out, John?
No, I'll just mirror what we just saw in that chart. In my state, I'm pretty sure the governor's military staff is 20 deep, right under him. But yet, very few look that up, so they don't see that part of it.
Yeah, and when we think about this stuff too, another thing I want you to remember, Steve, is one of the things I know about producing a private relief law or private relief bill, and we'll discuss this at another time. But it's a the path to that is through your state legislators, your state representatives, the senator and the House representatives. And that's the creation of a legislation on your private side that will mirror their public legislation. Like you said, that supervision, that indigenous government.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily supervision. It's an agreement.
Yeah, it
It's
would be a
quid pro quo.
Be more of a treaty or a semi-contract that would basically
Correct.
say, hey, this is how we're agreeing to do business and honor certain of your rules and procedures. And, basically the decorum and UCC is going to be kind of it after that, because keep in mind, with no provision, they got a provision for every single Indian tribe there is. There are no provisions for indigenous people. None.
Right. And that's that UCC is talking about is Article 9, holder in due course.
Correct.
The holder in due course is the one that gets to enforce. That's where your enforcement comes, is holding the instrument, knowing what it is, and knowing how to use it in this usufruct. Very simple.
Yeah, David Williams, yes, I did play for the Houston Texans, Colts, Eagles, Jets, Patriots, Packers, Chiefs, Texans, and Vikings.
Yes, that is him. This is the football player, yes. He came from, he's familiar with Paul Enslaved too. That's where
we
he's seen it before. Yeah. So anyway, with that, guys, I appreciate your support. Everybody down in chat, appreciate the support. Remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. And you know me, guys. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. And that's to say, I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you, and have a good night.
I love you, Wiz.
You bet. All right. Have a good night, everybody.